So I guess I was in that kind of bunch of students or pupils that are kind of forgotten in the middle, kind of just get on with it. On a Sunday morning at 12, 13 years old, getting on my bike and delivering, 180 newspapers. I remember him saying to me at the time, come on, mate, you don't want to be doing what I'm doing for the rest of your life. You come home from work completely covered in muck.
Today I'm with Matt, a research scientist from the Midlands whose work on ageing is deeply rooted in personal experience. Raised on a council estate in Chelmsley Wood, Birmingham, by working class parents, Matt left school with just one GCSE. But through night school, perseverance, and support from his family, he went on to earn a PhD. Now working in academia, he's passionate about mentoring students from similar backgrounds, staying true to his roots, and pushing for a more inclusive, culturally aware education system. You're right, Matt. How you doing? You good?
Oh, yeah, very well, thank you.
How was that for an intro? Was that okay for you?
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. So could you tell us a little bit about your role and what do you currently do? What is it that you do?
Yeah, so as you've alluded to, I guess my role is research scientist. I'm assistant professor at a large Midlands university, and yeah, my I guess my background and kind of research interests are in aging and essentially exploring how we can reduce kind of the impact and occurrence of falls in older people, and I mainly target falls from a psychological perspective. So we explore predictors of falls, for example, fear of falling, and we also investigate what causes that.
Okay, cool. So so this series is mainly about working class and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And one of the main questions I always ask my guests is, how do you define it? What does working class mean to you?
Yeah, so it's it's that sense that you have to graft for everything.
Yep.
Nothing's handed to you. Uh, it's that kind of strong work ethic, and to me, I see working class as the it's not having access to the things that perhaps those that aren't working class do have access to. So not having those doors that are open for you.
Mm.
And yeah, for me personally, as what kind of characterize a working class person? It's that kind of being a resilient person, being stoic. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
No, that's cool. Yeah. So as I mentioned in the intro, you literally left school with one GCSE, and now
yeah.
you're uh, academic, like with a PhD. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so for those that watch, who aren't aware uh, of where Chelmsley Wood is, it's a fairly working class area of Birmingham or Solihull. Um, it's got a reputation for being kind of this large council estate, and yeah. So I grew up in this part of Birmingham. Good upbringing. Parents brought me up correctly.
Hmm.
But yeah, I kind of went to a school that I guess stereotypically, a rough school. Um, wasn't one of the bad kids. Wasn't necessarily one of the good kids either. So I guess I was in that kind of bunch of students or pupils that are kind of forgotten in the middle, kind of just get on with it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I guess I just probably didn't apply myself as you'd want and or expect, and kind of left with nothing. The only thing that I left was GCSE and PE, owing
Hmm.
to my kind of athletic background, and I was quite a competitive triple jumper, so I did quite well in physical education, and I guess that's what led me into have a background in sport and exercise science. But yeah, so I kind of had this difficult time at school. Um, didn't leave with anything in terms of qualifications that could set me up
Mm.
for you know the next step in further education. And then yeah, decided to sort my life out and basically did a little bit of night school um to essentially catch up, do some kind of vocational qualifications, got myself into a good quality college sixth form education, and yeah, I did a BTEC, and I guess from there the rest is kind of history.
But your parents, though, like from working class, low income
Yep.
jobs. So, what were their initial thoughts? You've left school with only this one GCSE. How were they about it? Was there something that kind of was there something that they would have said to you that kind of spurred you? Actually, I need to do something here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think my parents were impressed. Um, I opted to not sit most of the exams, so that
Yeah.
they weren't impressed. Um, I think they thought there was potential in me to do something, but yeah, obviously didn't realize that at the time. And yeah, I never kind of forget that my dad at the time kind of said he was a plumber by trade and a
Mm.
roofer, and yeah, he used to work for the counter, so you can imagine he was in some jobs that weren't exactly very glamorous. And I remember him saying to me at the time, come on, Matt, you don't want to be doing what I'm doing for the rest of your life. You come home from work completely covered in muck, sort of
Mm.
thing. And that kind of always stuck with me, thinking, do I want to do a physical kind of grafting job? Is that what I want? You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was never kind of parents were always really supportive, but obviously they weren't impressed about kind of
Yeah.
what happened at the end of kind of 5 years of secondary education.
Yeah. So, well, was there like a defining moment where you're like, actually, I need to really get into sorting myself out here?
I think so. So I went on to college, kind of, I was enjoying it, and I was doing pretty well. It was a
Mm.
sports studies BTEC, so I was enjoying it. And yeah, unfortunately in 2006 my dad passed away very suddenly.
Mm.
And I think, my dad was I could tell he was really proud that I'd gone on to college, and kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't take the path that he didn't want me to take, which was, the kind of the graft 9 to 5 type thing. And yeah, when he passed away, I think that, it was a horrible time. An 18-year-old, it's never a good time to lose a parent, but at 18 years old,
Yeah.
it's a really difficult, I think, period of a young lad's life. And yeah, I think that kind of gave me this kind of intrinsic motivation that you can't get from kind of other
Yeah.
other ways of being motivated. And that's what I guess kind of pushed me on to go into, well, apply myself, and then also go on to, higher education and become a kind of a first generation graduate. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's probably a turning point in my life, was losing my dad suddenly.
Okay. And because like going into further, well, higher education, especially now, it is quite expensive, and the cost and the fact that you've managed to do a degree, get a master's, and now get this PhD and get to where you are now. In terms of financially, because you are coming from a low income household, how was it for you? What did you do to be able to get you through those years?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, university is expensive. I I I
Mm.
I went to university when it wasn't so expensive, in the olden days, when it's
Yeah.
like 3 grand to get your degree, but a year. But yeah, I think, first and foremost, it there's some anxiety there about going
Mm.
into a kind of a 3-year degree program that you might do okay, and you might get a good job at the end, but
Yeah.
it's kind of take on that debt. That was always a concern. But for me, the sacrifice I made was essentially living from home.
Yeah.
Sorry, commuting to the university, and staying at home. On one hand, I was missing out on that kind of that experience of being a fresher, and all those
Yeah.
things that come with it. But on the other hand, I was at home. I was supporting my mum, who was obviously widowed, and kind of felt like I needed to be there for her. So I guess, there was worry about the financial commitment. Um, but I kind of, I always viewed of university as it's an investment in me, and I kind of thought,
Mm.
if this pays off, then I could get a good job, because the better job you get, the more money you
Yeah.
earn generally. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I essentially stayed at home. Um, uh, in the earlier days in college, obviously because I was from a low socioeconomic household, um, I received kind of quite generous benefits from the I think they used to call it the EMA at the time,
Yeah,
but it,
the education maintenance allowance. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so that helped, it wasn't significant, it wasn't substantial, but yeah, I think maybe 30 quid a week, something like that. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it kind of, it paid for me to kind of live. Um and so yeah, like I say, went to university, only took out loans for tuition fees, didn't need
Mm.
to take out kind of the maintenance loans that typically you would take. So I left uni with kind of 10 grand of debt, which, in this day and age is nothing. So
Mm.
so yeah.
No, no, because like I think that's the thing as well. Like, because you've worked your way through uni. I assume you were working, and um, how how
Yeah.
how did you end up breaking into the role that you're in now?
Yeah, so you just a point on working. I so when I was at university and when I did my PhD, you know, I I I did some not so glamorous jobs just to keep myself going essentially. So
Yeah.
I was a cleaner, I used to clean toilets, vacuum
Mm.
offices, clean desks, clean
Yeah.
kitchens, etc. So it wasn't, you kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You kind of get the
Just
job done,
grafting.
do what you've
Yeah.
got to do to get through it, sort of thing. And I couldn't lean on my mum at the time because she was a cleaner and a kitchen server herself. So she used to work at
Yeah.
school as a kitchen server. So
Yeah.
the money wasn't there. I didn't have a pot to dip into. But yeah, essentially, I obviously did pretty well at college. Went on to do my degree, did very well in my degree.
Mm.
Won lots of awards, things like graduate of the year and stuff like that. And then, yeah, at the time, my kind of favorite lecturer said to me, "Oh, Matt, have you thought about going on to do some research?" And at the time, I was like, "Well, what can I do with that? What am I going to earn
Yeah.
And he sent me a link to a website where there was a master's research program advertised, which was funded at a large Midlands university, and I put an application in, and I ended up getting it. And then, yeah, I guess I then transferred onto a PhD, and essentially the fees were covered as part of the kind of the university's program
Mm.
to support uh, uh, doctoral students. But there was no kind of stipend attached to that. So in terms of living, I had to continue doing the cleaning job,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was a pretty long 6 years through the degree and then PhD. Kind of 9 hours a day doing the
Yeah.
education, then 4 hours on the evening doing cleaning. It wasn't
But
didn't have
like
much of a
like like
social life.
yeah, but like you said, it's an investment in yourself, and you saw
Yeah,
that, and
yeah. I
that
mean,
kind of, it's that perseverance, isn't it?
course, yeah, and it's never a guarantee, is it? You hope that what you're doing is the right thing, but my pals at the time, there were really good jobs. Some work on kind of um for national kind of transport companies, and they were doing really well. And I thought, is this all worth it? That I remember
Yeah.
the one year they all went to Vegas, and I couldn't go. I did everything I could to try and go with my pals for a stag do, and I couldn't go. And
Yeah.
the reality is, I just couldn't scrape that sort of money together. And there were moments where I was like, is this really worth it?
Mm.
What am I going to get from it? And then yeah, I landed it. I had my first interview when I finished the PhD, and I landed my first job. So I was very lucky, and I have
Yeah.
been very lucky actually with uh kind of interviews and jobs since then.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I suppose it's those sacrifices that you do quite early on. You're basically playing the long game,
that's it.
and you
Yeah,
have to make them sacrifices. And I
yeah,
suppose coming from a low income household and working class, you can see there's a lot of struggle. So it's like, actually, if I persevere with this, I'll get to where I want to go. Would you
yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, the short term win it's human nature, isn't it? You chase the kind of
Mm.
that easy success. And yeah, I mean, look, I could have quite easily gone down a different route, but you know, it happened how it did, and I think perhaps it wasn't by design. Perhaps I didn't intend to kind of see the long term gain. But
Yeah.
looking back, clearly I did. Clearly, there was an agenda there for me to kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
see the see through those kind of long term goals.
Yeah, so you managed to break into your academic role.
Mm.
I think there's a common perception that people that work within academia are generally from like middle class.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that something you'd agree with? Have you found there's been barriers because of your working class roots? How has that worked for you?
You know, I think that traditionally, and I hope these kind of stereotypes are changing now, but traditionally, you know, you look at university and it's white middle class. You know, that's kind of that's kind of the
Demographic, yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the typical kind of idea of the demographic, and certainly not the case anymore. Um, but yeah, I guess, is there barriers? To an extent, yes. I mean, look, you when you get into academia, there by merit.
Mm.
Um, you know, if you do well in your, you know, your PhD, publish lots of papers, you you'll get a position. That's the way it works. You know, it's there's I don't tend to think that there's a there's kind of a barrier in terms of being working class, but obviously there's a typical kind of demographic that you stereotypically see it as a university
Yeah.
lecturer.
Yeah, so have you ever found like, there's been instances where your working class roots has kind of been mentioned or people have talked about it or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been loads of situations, and especially from students, kind of go, oh, you know, you're from here, and you know,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll get some of my Brummie students come from go, oh, are you from this area of Birmingham? You know, I
Yeah.
think there's quite a distinctive accent from the southeast area of Birmingham, but yeah, and often it's kind of that's quite a nice kind of icebreaker for students that you don't really know and that don't know you. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, look, you get these kind of these offhand comments from colleagues where, you know, not necessarily kind of offensive, but
Yeah.
definitely kind of a subtle mention of the accent.
Yeah.
Whether there's a link there to being working class, I don't know, but there's definitely an accent, and
Yeah.
that has been mentioned in the past.
Um, yeah, so you briefly mentioned about your students there. And in the intro, I mentioned there's a level of mentorship that you have for your students. So, yeah, what kind of advice do you give them if they're coming from similar backgrounds and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I tend to get this gravitation of students that do come from a similar background, kind of, you know, wanting to come to me, not necessarily for academic support. I mean, that's part of the role, but I guess more so for some of the pastoral support.
Mm.
And I always just kind of the advice I give to the students is, you know, don't kind of some of them have this perception that they can't they can't achieve what they would like to achieve, you
Yeah.
know, and whether that's linked to their background, it's hard to say. But I always kind of say to them, you know, don't wait for things to happen. Don't wait for doors to be open. You have to go and do that yourself. And I think that does link back to kind of upbringing or my upbringing anyway.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, my working class roots, it's that kind of get up, do it yourself, kind of
Yeah.
that can do attitude, I guess.
Now that you are working in like academia, what's sort of the general consensus from your family like? Because obviously they were working in low income paid
Mm.
jobs. So yeah, what's kind of like your family's reaction to it all now then?
I mean, I think immense pride, probably, you know, at least from my mum's perspective, bless her.
Mm.
She any moment she gets to drop in my kind of the fact, oh, my son's a PhD, you know,
Yeah.
she sees it as quite a big deal, bless her. But that's again because of, like you've just said, you know, we're from a low income, you know, so we've uh, traditionally my family have kind of been, you know, cleaners, kitchen workers, you know,
Yeah,
grafters
yeah.
basically. And so yeah, I think probably pride is probably the one word to kind of characterize how my mum would view my kind of position. But yeah, I guess, you know, my wife probably the same, you know. I'm in a privileged position at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you know, I've had to work to get there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in a privileged position from the point of view that you know, I can help shape kind of next generation of kind of
Yeah.
graduates, but also that I can especially with the research that I do and the work that I do, it generally has significant kind of societal community impact.
Oh,
So
that's good. Yeah.
so obviously from family's perspective, there's just a lot of pride, I guess, in kind of where I've
Yeah.
kind of got to. And actually, you know, aunts and uncles and stuff that kind of see me grow up, I guess there's a lot of surprise as well. I've
Yeah.
got one aunt who's a pretty big champion of mine who actually works at university, and you know, I guess she still kind of shows whenever I see her, she still kind of refers back to when I was a kid, and she kind of says, "I still can't believe where you are." So yeah, surprise and pride, I think, are probably two nice words.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. So like, yeah, because you now work within a university, and a lot of places you always hear about like this diversity, equality, and inclusion, and you have a lot of places where it feels like it's just a box ticking exercise. Is that something you've noticed working with the university, or how does it feel there?
I think a lot has changed in academia or higher education the last kind of 10 years that I've been in it.
Hmm.
Um, yes, there's a lot of tick boxing, or box ticking.
Hmm.
Um, I think change is happening, you know, uh, but there needs to be kind of genuine investment in widening participation. I think in university there is still a typical demographic, and yeah, there's as we said earlier in the conversation, there's definitely a type of person that you associate with university.
Yeah.
So that I don't think that cultural change has happened yet in academia, where it's a true, genuine kind of organic change.
Uh,
Um, but I think universities are certainly leading the way when it comes to kind of pushing change for equity,
yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No. No. Yeah, I probably would agree with that because that's the thing, isn't it? It's, if it is educational institutions leading the way, then others should look to that to follow.
Yeah.
Throughout the conversation, you've always talked about being in the Midlands. And I know with a lot of people's careers starting out, especially coming from what, working class and low income households, for them to get to the better jobs, they end up having to move.
Mm.
But by the sounds of it, you've always kind of been in the Midlands. So I'm guessing location's never really been an issue for you then.
Yeah, I mean, it's more by chance, to be honest. It's essentially applying for jobs that are local, and some
Yeah.
people can't do that. Some people have to kind of, uh, they have to chase those roles, and they often
Mm.
aren't local. Lots of roles in London. But yeah, for me personally, I've never kind of had to apply for any roles outside of the Midlands, and so kind of, you know, I've kind of stuck to my roots, if you like, in terms of where I've lived, in a
Yeah,
working
yeah.
class area and stuff like that. So kind of, yeah, yeah, I've not found kind of living location and working location to be a huge stumbling block.
Yeah.
Um,
So so would you say this kind of like feeds back into would you say you've moved on from your working class roots, or would you still say, oh, I still see myself as working class then?
certainly still see myself as working class.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got a good job. I earn I guess a reasonable salary now.
Yeah.
Um, I still have to work to live.
Yeah.
Our household income isn't very high at all. So I'm firmly still a working class person. That's how I see myself.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't really want it any other way, to be honest. My family are, you know, they're all still working class, and
Mm.
to me, that's kind of where I feel at home. And yeah, I kind of uh, I'm still in my mind a working class person. I don't have kind of a, a trust fund or a bottomless pit of money to tap into as and when needed. So yeah, I have to work to live, essentially.
Yeah. No, 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 that's fair. That's fair. I think I suppose it kind of keeps you grounded as well, because oftentimes, like for me, for instance, I live in London now and I work here. And oftentimes there's people I've worked with where they end up forgetting who they are and where they've come from. And, you never quite know. Sometimes people fall on hard times and they have to go back to that, and they just can't because
Yeah, I mean, look, I won't get into specifics, but recently I was put through a process in which I potentially could have lost my job, and
Mm,
I got to be honest, I looked at it and thought, is this still for me? Do I need to go and change career? And I looked at
yeah,
all sorts, and I was looking at. I said to my wife at the time, if I have to go and you know whatever it is, deliver parcels, stack shelves, whatever it
yeah,
is, I'll do it. To pay the bills. I've got two small children, and so, but that was a no brainer for me. And I guess
yeah, yeah,
having that
yeah.
kind of that kind of working class background perhaps set me up for that potential
In
traumatic
case, yeah.
traumatic moment in my life where my whole career might have disappeared.
No, no, I completely know where you're coming from. Yeah,
And so really, yeah, it was kind of it's that can do. I remember speaking to my mum about it, and she kind of said, "Well, you just got to do what you got to do." And there was never kind of a batter of an eyelid for me. It is that is what it
yeah,
is, and I've done all these jobs before, so yeah, I think yeah, I think kind of having that background and as kind of um set not set me off. I don't think that's the right term, but has equipped me for
yeah,
potentially problematic situations at work
yeah.
where you can lose your job.
You've got that dogged approach in case
Yeah,
the worst, if the shit hits the fan,
that's
basically.
it. And I think
Yeah,
I always the word I always think of is kind of stoicism. It's just that kind of it is what it is. You got to get on with it, and you got to do it. And
yeah,
yeah, I think that kind of stoic attitude is, I guess to me, it's what kind of characterizes a hard working class British person. It's that
yeah. Just get up, do it, get
get up
on.
and get on with it.
Yeah. Currently, students have to be in education up until the age of 18.
Mm.
Do you feel like sometimes that can help or hinder them, especially when previous governments are kind of steering it towards STEM subjects and then getting rid of like arts? It might be changing now, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's in my mind, I think it can go both ways. I mean, on one hand, it keeps options open longer for
Mm,
people um, who might not have seen further education as a possibility. Which, for me, for example, that's me.
yeah,
There was no possibility of further education for me. I remember when I was 16 years old. I couldn't see any future in education. So it might keep some options open longer for people.
yeah.
Um, my issue with the STEM kind of agenda is that if 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 the curriculum is pushing everybody towards STEM, um, firstly, if the first issue is without the correct pathways to support that,
Mm,
especially for working class students, it's just another way of kind of filtering people who get through.
yeah,
I think that's one issue. And I think, yeah, the other issue is kind of, potentially losing that creativity of some of these guys who are never gonna have a vocation in STEM. Um,
yeah, yeah. Gives you a different perspective on how to approach stuff, I suppose.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was there anything else that you wanted to kind of highlight, especially from your working class roots or working within academia? Was there stuff that you wanted people to kind of know, or any words of wisdom that you had?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because, I mean, yes, there's lots of things I want to say and could say. I think everybody's kind of pathway is different, everybody's situation is different. You should never judge anybody until you've walked kind of mile in the shoes, the classic saying. And then
Hmm.
for me, it's about complete perseverance. Look, I'm an academic at the end of the day. I'm
Yeah.
not a billionaire. I feel like I've done well from the situation that was in and some of the challenges and obstacles I had in life, like losing my dad. And actually, to be honest, beyond that, I lost kind of my grandparents very, very quickly and my dad all within about 4 or 5 years. And,
Yeah.
bless my mom, she really struggled. And yeah, that kind of rubbed off on me, sort of thing.
Mm.
It was a struggle for a long time. And I guess to an extent, that the kind of the education, the pursuing education was maybe a bit of a distraction from the reality of
Yeah.
life, which was bereavement.
Mm.
And I still say it to now. I don't think I've fully kind of digested that sudden loss of my dad. And you know, I wouldn't be human if I said I didn't still feel upset
Yeah,
and kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
and emotional when I think about it. But having two small children now, it still gives me that drive
Yeah.
to do well. So I think a lot of kind of where I've gone and what I've done is kind of emanates from kind of personal loss. Um,
Yeah.
but any advice to kind of similar people in this, situations to me, maybe maybe not kind of on the correct path for whatever reason that might be. I guess it's just perseverance and kind of having that goal and not letting anything get in the way of it. Um,
Yeah.
and also making, as you mentioned, making sacrifices where necessary.
Mm.
You know, um, it's not always about the short term win. It's about
Yeah.
kind of the long term picture sometimes.
And yeah, because you briefly mentioned your children there. So do you feel like there's going to be a more equal society in terms of like working class and just the social dynamics? Do you feel like when your children grow up, do you think it will be more equity between everyone?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, look, in the last, I can only judge from the last kind of 10, 15 years that I've
Yeah.
been, in employment. And I've seen huge changes in how my employers have kind of um, changed policy and practice to actually
Yeah.
allow kind of equity and to kind of flourish, I guess.
Mm.
So are we going in the right direction? Absolutely. Do I hope that my children have better opportunities? Yes, of course I do.
Yeah.
Um, will that happen? I mean, that's the $1 million
Yeah.
things like that are, I have no idea. We're in an uncertain time, I think, in lots of different aspects of life at the moment, politically,
Yeah.
especially so. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, but yeah, I would hope that my children have uh, better opportunities and kind of aren't in positions where they've just got to kind of slog it so heavily. Although I don't want them to lose that kind of that attitude and
Yeah.
I will definitely absolutely kind of embed that kind of work ethic.
Yeah. Yeah. But I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Because you've been brought up working class, and it's instilling that mentality, and it's a form of culture, isn't it?
It's
Really?
it's cultural.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I think back to when I on a Sunday morning at 12, 13 years old, getting on my bike and delivering 180 newspapers on before going to play football. That's a cultural thing that you can't that's the sort of kind of experience that you have to go through. You
Yeah.
have to go through these things to kind of um set yourself up for that work ethic. I already mentioned, done probably jobs again stereotypically aren't that desirable, but you do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think it's definitely a cultural thing, and I'll be pushing my uh children to do paper rounds, and then maybe
Yeah.
whatever it is, go and work at a florist or whatever it might be. Anything that will allow them to kind of earn some money on a weekend
Yeah.
and on the evenings.
It's just getting those like early life skills, I suppose, isn't it? It's recognizing it is hard out there, and you got to earn your way
Well,
through.
yeah, it's what we said. Nothing's you know for the working class person. Very rarely is something given to you.
Mm.
You've often got to make things happen, and you can't wait for anybody to do that for you. So yeah, we'll definitely kind of enforce that kind of get up and go and do it yourself kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I've ever had any kind of doors open for me. I always say I've made my own kind of luck and opportunity.
Mm.
And I know that isn't the case for for other people that don't come from working class backgrounds, where doors will be opened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's very subjective, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, no, I'm just where we've pretty much covered everything there. If anyone wants to kind of get in touch, are you on like socials or anything like that?
I'm no longer since Twitter ended. I'm no longer on social media, but I can obviously link or send kind of both professional and personal email addresses, and I'm more than happy to
Yeah.
chat about anything that I've discussed. Whether it's someone that wants to get into kind of academia and feels like they're in a similar position, or just general life. Maybe it's someone that's just had a bereavement and just thinking, be nice to speak to someone who's gone down that kind of
Yeah.
who's gone through that. So yeah, I can link
Yeah,
contact
I
details for
can
sure.
put the details in the
Yeah,
description below
yeah,
and stuff.
sounds
So
good.
yeah, no, thanks for that. It was yeah, really, really, really good. Like a lot of the stuff that you shared there, and talking about your dad and stuff like that. So no, thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah, it's
much
it's it's
appreciated.
you're welcome, and obviously, it's not something I readily discuss. Things like personal kind of
Mm,
experiences, like losing parents, and but it's quite nice, quite therapeutic actually to talk about it, and and
yeah,
and actually it's important because, as I say, that was probably the catalyst for kind of going on and kind of getting to where I've got to and
yeah,
stuff, and so yeah, it'd be remiss if I didn't mention it.
yeah. Okay. On that note, it's a good way to end this. So thank you, and all the best.
Thanks. Cheers. All the best.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Initial Step. If you resonate with the stories we share and have a similar background you'd like to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch and maybe you'll be featured in an upcoming episode. And don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Be sure to check out our previous episodes for more inspiring stories. Until next time, we'll see you in the next one.